Let's talk numbers. 2. The number of people it took to exchange their genetic loading and love, resulting in yours truly. 1985, the year I was born. 6. The number of years that they endured before ending a toxic marriage. 1. The number of people who finally asked what was going on at home. 11. How old I was when I moved from one parent to another. 3. The amount of teachers who rallied around me in court as I entered foster care. 567,000. The number of kids in care that year that I joined in 1999. 27. The amount of miles that those teachers drove each day to make sure that I could stay in the same school. 4. The amount of social workers I went through in a span of 2 years. 10. The amount of times I remember moving over a span of 4 years. 26. The age of my sister when she took me in when I was a junior in high school as my final foster home. 1. The amount of time she grounded me. 9.5. My ACE score. Now that number, like many of the other ones, are out of my control. That number, 9.5, was stamped on my development without any warning. And the CDC defines an ACE score as adverse childhood experiences. It's a score that helps to tally the amount of traumatic events that a young person experiences in their first 18 years of life. The score goes from 0 to 10. And it also helps to implicate the potential long-term effects that that young person may experience as an adult in the areas of physical, social, spiritual, mental health, and well-being. So at that score, 9.5, completely out of my control, I am at a 4 to 12 times more likely chance to experience depression, alcoholism, suicide, disease, chronic health problems. I shouldn't be educated nor articulate. I should have had multiple babies by now, most likely from different relationships. And it's odd that I don't carry a criminal record or have any inpatient hospitalizations under my belt. But the most shocking statistic that I found when I learned of this ACE score is that because of that 9.5, there is a very high chance that I will die 20 years younger than my counterpart. Well, that's rude. So let's go back to numbers. 33, the number of years I've managed to stay alive, despite all of those odds listed before you. 4.0, my GPA in high school and college. 2, the number of clinical degrees I hold in social work. 13, the number of years I have worked steadily as a social worker in the clinical field. 0, the amount of health problems I currently have. Last number, most important number, and it's why I'm here, is 25. That's the number of people in my village that helped to bring me here today. And I want to ask you to think about your village. So picture it. What street did you grow up on? What did your house look like? What did your room look like? What did you do for the holidays? Who disciplined you and how? Who got you ready for prom? Who moved you into your first apartment? Who would you call right now for advice? Because whether we like it or not, those images flashing before your eyes today have a lot to do with who you are right now in this moment. Your values, your attachment to others, your moral compass, your ability to trust the world, and most importantly, your sense of self.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff.
Are you ready to level up? The podcast for leaders, entrepreneurs, and business with your hosts, Jose Medina and Crystal Garcia. It's time to level up.
And welcome to the Undeniable Level Up podcast, where we provide our listeners with life hacks in business, leveling up in your career, leveling up in your personal lives, and even leveling up in your relationships. Why strive to be average when you can be the best version of yourself with the tools, the tips, and sometimes with the tricks that we provide in our discussions. Last week, you heard from Alicia Anaya in our episode titled Killing the Procrastinator in You. Alicia shared with us her tips and tricks and even some of her personal struggles. Today, we're here to talk to you about raising children and why it indeed does take a village to raise a child, and how you as a parent can better equip your children for the battlefield of life and of being successful in that battlefield. Raising children can be one of the most rewarding experiences in life, but it can also be extremely, extremely challenging.
Extremely, huh?
Extremely.
Welcome back, everyone. We've missed you all. So we've all heard it. It takes a village to raise a child, right? It's a proverb or a traditional saying that has taken on, the meaning that it takes an entire community of people to gain experience and really grow. National Public Radio had done some research on the origins, went back to African cultures, and there's several different proverbs found throughout various cultures that, roughly mean the same thing. So what do you gather from this? Do you agree? Think it takes a village to raise a child?
Yeah, and I can see why it would start somewhere in Africa, because they had villages,
Because they had what?
Villages.
Oh.
You know what I'm saying?
Makes sense.
It still takes a village, I think. And even though our villages look different, the concept is still the same. You know what I'm saying? Like, it takes your kid in the town that you live in, or the village, or the city, or whatever, the community, is going to be exposed to a lot of different things at work or at school, at play, outside with his friends. And even nowadays, even inside your home, online, social media.
That's a
whole nother village, right? Yeah, so I think if you change the mind of the village and just use that concept of the village and think about like all the different interactions, social interactions that children go through, like those are all like symbolic villages that have an influence on that kid and how that kid develops. So yeah, I do agree with it.
That's really good.
Before we even begin to talk about the village, I think it's important to understand the concept of the village first, and we kind of were just talking about it a little bit. So what is the village exactly? A village is just a network of people and institutions that surround us as we are exposed to that contribute to our growth and our development. And so I think we can all remember different points in our life when we were influenced or impacted differently, depending on the social circle that we were in those involvements. Think of living in a town and never leaving it. That village that you're a part of would be the only one that assists in raising you. So without no outside interference, it'd only be that village, you know what I'm saying? And the people and the experiences within that village that would impact you into feeding into your experience and feeding into your knowledge and feeding into like who you are as a person as you grow up. Our psychological development includes our cognitive, emotional, intellectual, our social capabilities, and functioning beginning from infancy and continuing throughout our lifespan all the way into our old age. Our development is shaped by a multitude of factors that include our genetics, our environment, our social relationships, and experiences throughout our lives. Research this topic, and I'm sure you're going to find a plethora in each of these respective areas, all seeking to reveal and understand how we become who we are, how we're shaped. The field of epigenetics is a fascinating field that explores how behavioral and environmental influences impact expression of genes and influences our behavior and health. By recognizing the power of the village's impact on our genetic expression, we can better understand how we create a village where children thrive. Is this how you'd explain it, Crystal?
Yes, but I actually want to share a personal story with you guys and kind of what prompted this episode and the realization that I came to and basically what this kind of truly meant. So, as a parent, you want your children to be better than you, and you want to prevent them from learning experiences or experiencing things the hard way, such as the tough lessons or the speed bumps that you encountered along the way in your journey. So you make decisions to promote this in ways such as using what school district and neighborhood you live in. Now, I don't know any parent that wants to see their child in pain. In fact, it's quite excruciating for a parent, and you will certainly realize this as you hear this story. So recently, one of my children encountered a situation leading up to something that they had been working towards relentlessly. Now, when I say relentlessly, I mean they were so focused that no excuse veered them off their path. I watched my child tired, not feeling well, physically and mentally fatigued, push through and work so hard, like Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, or Danica Patrick. I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt no one was outworking my child. This situation became extremely stressful and emotionally overwhelming to the point that I watched as my child's heart broke before that event even occurred. Now, I've never been a helicopter parent, and you'll learn this throughout this episode. So I was self-reflecting and trying my best to kind of view the situation from different perspectives, because my child was hurting and it didn't feel good for me. Obviously, it didn't feel good for my child. So my child is extremely mature, and this was really for my child to deal with, not for me to swoop in and handle it. So as hard as this sounds, or as bad as this sounds, this wasn't the worst part. The worst part occurred the day of the event when I watched my child's heart ripped right out of their chest, again, right before me. So as you might expect, the result of the event was unsuccessful, but certainly not one that was earned or deserved. Now, while my child was expecting support from loved ones for such a big event, they didn't get it, and it came as a large blow and a very painful consequence. In this moment, my heart shattered. Now, to top things off, I'm an empath. So I didn't just watch all of this, I felt it all. I became so emotional that I had to go to the bathroom and actually had my fist over my mouth. And I don't cry often, but I watched the largest crocodile tears fall from my eyes, in silence, of course, to the floor at my feet, in the bathroom stall that I was in. And in this moment, I wasn't feeling like me. I was feeling really emotionally scattered. That whole, be strong for your child. Yeah, I was definitely struggling there. And I realized in that moment that my child needed support, and more importantly, their heart to be victorious. And it wasn't possible without a heart. Makes sense, right? I would have, without question, replaced theirs with mine. Now, in this moment, this event was completely insignificant to me, as my child's life was more important. Naturally, I was experiencing a flood of emotions that included anger. I wanted to unleash the tsunami that you get if you hurt somebody that I love. But I had to pull myself together, give myself a pep talk, as did my husband, all still while I'm in the bathroom stall. Truth be told, this was not my battle. This was my child's. And regardless of how I felt, it was important that I empower my child as opposed to removing the power in that critical moment. And as parents, that can be so hard, because it's obviously not enjoyable to see your child hurting or to see your child experience something difficult. You want to come in and comfort them and shield them, and but you have to learn those lessons. While still sitting in the stall, my child messages me for backup, and not to fight their battle, but to ensure that the battlefield was fair. I knew this was a significant emotional event for them and a monumental moment. And trust me, I had pulled myself together, threw some water on my face, and walked out powerfully and pumped up. I was ready to engage and ready to skip some steps in the escalation of force if required. You know what, though? I experienced the most extraordinary moment I had ever experienced as a mom, and it was up close and personal. I watched my child step out to the line of the battlefield, victoriously retrieve their heart, dump their baggage out of their rucksack, and then with no hesitation whatsoever, draw their sword and raise it with a show of force, and someone that you definitely don't want to come face to face with on the battlefield. I was so proud. I realized in that moment, as proud as I was, that my child didn't need my backup. I didn't need it. But I was so proud to have witnessed it. And it, truthfully, it was in this moment that I suddenly realized that it does take a village to raise a child. And I wanted to share it with all of you because I wish I knew it before I had my first child. I tell my youngest child all the time that she got the best version of me as a parent, because when your first child's born, you make a lot of mistakes. And you know what? I'm sure gonna make a lot of mistakes to the very end. We all do. And that's normal. Except you. You don't make mistakes.
Perfect.
You're perfect. I wish that I would have had somebody to share tools with me that I could have used with my children. But here I am at 41 years old with 6 children, 3 stepchildren, and 2 grandchildren. And if I have you guessing, I had my first child at 15. And though that's the age that you typically think that you know everything, right? Most certainly, I didn't. So this is actually a key component to number one of raising a successful child. Be deliberate about the village and the tents that you expose your children to. I actually picture a village as a bunch of tents. Think of the Wild Wild West for a minute. Each tent represents a location where your children will draw their learning and be equipped for the battlefield, which is past a line that you cannot continue with them, and this is life. You're not always going to be there, and that's just the honest truth. So one tent may be for intellectual growth, such as school. Another tent may be for tool achievement, such as a sword, or a tent for successfully achieving conflict resolution. These are just a mere few, and all equally important. The village is preparing your child for the battlefield, so remember that. So think of that as we continue throughout this podcast today, and ask yourself, what village is my child or are my children in? Research has shown that many severe mental health disorders have a hereditary component. Yet the environment and behavior, such as improved diet, reduced stress, physical activity, and a positive mindset, can determine whether this health condition ever even is expressed. That's a pretty big deal. That's a very big deal. What are your thoughts? I know it's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot to unpack. Story's touching, and I know you were being deliberate in not sharing a lot of details in that explanation in that story. But a couple of things that stood out to me was you talk about preparing your kid for the battlefield of life. And in this moment, you saw that your child was going through something that was extremely difficult for your child. And so in that process, as all parents want to do, and I've seen this as, growing up when my kids were little, you want to be mama bear. You want to jump in and you want to defend, you want to attack whatever is hurting your baby,
Sure.
Yeah. But you also realized that you had raised a kid that was resilient, that was intelligent, that understood how to handle conflict, that understood how to navigate emotions, how to control emotions and make good decisions. I think that's what the whole experience of you sitting in the bathroom, going through your brain saying, I want to go help my kid, but I know I already prepared her for this. You know what I'm saying? And I've got to let my child fight their own fight. You know what I'm saying? And that's very hard for parents to do. And it takes a very strong and self-aware parent to be able to sit back and go, okay, my son is hurt, but my son can recover from this. My son knows how to be resilient. My son knows how to recover from this. My daughter knows how to handle this pain. My child knows how to handle this experience in a way that's going to make them stronger. You know what I'm saying? And then being able to come out and then witness it in real action. The emotion there is really about feeling that you did the right thing. Like you've done the right things. You know what I'm saying? And you feel like, okay, I've prepared this child for life. You haven't handicapped this child. This child is going to be successful no matter what, because they're demonstrating the things that you've taught. And I agree with the research. I think that it's important that you expose your kids deliberately to certain things. And your kids are going to be exposed indeliberately to a lot of negative things. You know what I'm saying? Like drugs and alcohol and bullying and all that stuff, pornography and revenge porn. And like, you know what I'm saying? Like all those things, your kid will go through all those things and experience all those things as they're growing up. And if they don't know how to deal with it, then it makes it hard for them to overcome those challenges. It's going to come no matter what. Whether you're 15, whether you're 12, whether you're 32, whether you're 45, those things happen throughout life. And if you don't learn how to deal with them at the beginning, then how do you deal with them later on in life? So you've got to build that resiliency.
I think it's important that parents realize that you're not perfect. As much as you'd like to think that you are, you pride yourself on your parenting skills, you can always improve, right? Absolutely, we all can. So I think it's important to have a little bit of grace with yourself when you're going through parenting, because, man, you can have some struggles parenting. And you're going to have times where you're tearful or where you're angry, or, you know, just where you're experiencing emotions at a level that maybe you've never experienced before. And just know that that's all normal. There's not anything wrong with you.
Key component number 2 of raising a successful child is to be a good role model. This is crucial, and trust me, I know this can be hard, especially when you're a parent at a young age like you were, and you haven't even quite figured out who you are yet. You know what I'm saying? How do you exhibit those behaviors that you don't even realize your child is learning from you?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? The truth is that our children learn far more from what we do than what we say. While we can't always control what and who our children are exposed to, whether that be school, church, friends, whatever, anywhere really, we can control what we model for them.
Sure.
I read a book once that said everything in life is a graded event. This statement resonates because you're always being observed by those around you, and in this case, your children. This book was really relating to the workplace and leadership, and saying, like, when you're a leader, people are always looking to you to see what your behavior is, and then they're copying that, they're mimicking it, right? That's how we generally learn growing up. And in the absence of knowledge, you look around, you see what everybody else is doing, and you do that. Like, you know what I'm saying? It's got to be right? Everybody's doing it. And I think that kids learn the same way. And so you're always being graded. You know what I'm saying? And sometimes kids will see you make mistakes. And how you handle that mistake will determine how that kid will handle their mistake. You know what I'm saying? So if your kid is lying, you got to ask yourself, where did he learn that behavior from? Like, you know, I swear I went to church on Sunday. So research shows that children learn to imitate behavior by watching others. They imitate behavior based on the reinforcement those behaviors receive. So use this as an opportunity to model important lessons for the battlefield of life. I know we laugh at all the funny child TikToks we see, but be careful, because laughter is an unintentional positive reinforcement. If you laugh at a behavior, children take that as being an acceptable behavior. And one that kind of stands out is the little kids. And I even did it when I was a parent and my kid cussed for the first time. It's super cute. Right? It's like, oh, I can't believe he just said
it's a surprise.
Yeah. And you kind of laugh about it, and then they say it again. You're like, don't say that. It's a bad word. Because you know, the laughter of it is, you lose the laughter after you realize that now you've got to teach the kid a lesson. And there's been plenty of times when I've corrected my child and then I turned around and laughed in private. Like, you know what I'm saying? About those.
Because you're surprised, you know?
Yeah. And I'll share a little story about one of my children that was the same exact type of situation. So when my kids were very young, I would say, like, they were very, very young. I think my son was probably about maybe 4 or 5. I don't even think he was in school yet.
He wasn't 15.
No. My wife at the time, she had made pudding, and she had put it inside the refrigerator. I got home or whatever, and I opened the refrigerator. There's a handprint in the middle of the pudding. And I'm looking at it like, that's not intentional. That obviously somebody put their hand in there and grabbed a whole handful of pudding out. So I go to the living room. My kids are all upstairs, and I'm like, hey, everybody get downstairs. And all 3 of my kids run downstairs, and I line them up in a formation. And I'm looking at my son, and he's covered in chocolate, right? I give him the opportunity to be truthful, right? So I'm like, one of you guys stuck your hand in the pudding and ate the pudding. And so I went to my oldest daughter, and I said, was it you? And she said, no, Dad, it was not me. And I went to my youngest daughter, and I said, was it you? She says, no, Dad, it wasn't me. I went to my son. I said, was it you? He was like, no, Dad, it wasn't me. I said, go upstairs, look in the mirror, and then come back and tell me if it was you or not. And so he runs upstairs. He's there. He's gone for like a minute or two, and then he runs back downstairs. He's done cleaned everything up. He's like, no, it wasn't me. I know it was you, buddy. But, you know, internally I was laughing because that was a really funny situation. But then I had to tell him, like, no, you don't do that. You don't go in the refrigerator without permission. You don't put your hands in stuff. You don't eat things because you don't want your kid to get sick. You don't want your kid to get injured. You don't want him to eat something he's not supposed to eat. Like, you know, so part of that is also understanding that whatever outward display that you have is going to reinforce that behavior. And if I just would have laughed and blown it off, he would have continued to do.
You would have thought it was funny.
Yeah,
you would have tried to get the
and
same
it was
funny
okay.
reaction. Yeah.
My dad says my dad feels like this is okay. You know what I'm saying? So
For sure.
if you want your kids to be physically fit, show them that maybe in a family activity. I know when I was growing up, I did that with my kids. You know, I was always working out, and we were always going out and running and playing outside. And when my son got old enough to go to the gym, he would go to the gym with me, and he would lift weights and whatnot. If you want your kids to do things that you want them to do as they grow up, you have to take them through that process and you have to teach that to them. And there's some things that I probably could have done better growing up with my children if I had known that my behavior is what they were watching and not what I was saying to them. Because there's a lot of times I made a lot of mistakes, and I'm sure they've learned some bad habits from my mistakes. You know what I'm saying? That now I can't go back and change. It's already ingrained. It's already deep rooted. But it's important that if you're a young parent or you have young kids, that you understand that they're watching you and they're seeing what you're doing, and whatever you do, if you think that there's no consequence, there is a deeper consequence there. Do you think this is how you learn, Crystal?
For sure. I actually have a couple of stories. I'll try to make them short. So first one is my middle son. I used to work 12
You
hours.
have 6 kids. You don't have a middle son.
Yeah, because I have 3 sons. So he's the
Oh,
middle.
okay.
So my middle son, smart kid. And, you know, all kids, they like doing fun things and like receiving nice things. And they don't like to be bored, right? Well, I was working 12-hour shifts at night. And then I was also doing school in the morning. And I would fall asleep. So one day I fell asleep in the house, and my kids pushed a chair up to the door, undid the chain, which they've never done before, right? So I didn't teach them this. Undid the chain, undid the deadbolt, undid the lock. He went to the pool, and he went by himself. So like his sister didn't go with him, you know, his brother didn't go with him. Nobody went with him. They didn't want to get in trouble. And he went by himself. And at the time, he actually had, they had these little swimsuits that had like an inner tube connected to them so that it didn't like slide up and down or whatever. And so I had one of those for all my kids. And he didn't even put that on. So he just went out and he jumped in the pool. And obviously, I wasn't there. I had fallen asleep. His sisters and his brothers aren't there. So I end up, you know, getting a knock at my door, and still asleep, by the way. And my daughter's like, "Hey, Mom, somebody's at the door." And I said, "Okay." I go to the door. "Is your child about this big?" You know, "Yes." "Is your child in the house?" "Jasmine, is the child in the house?" "No, Mom." And I'm like, fudge, you know? She's like, "He jumped in the pool. Somebody had to grab him out of the pool." And, you know, they wanted to call Child Protective Services. And man, I felt horrible, because then you start thinking, you know, like, what if something would have happened? In that moment, like, I was upset and I was hurt because I was thinking, what if something would have happened? I would have felt so guilty. You know, I would have felt like it was my fault. But I realized something, that your children do watch you, because I didn't have to teach them how to undo the chain or undo the deadbolt. They see you do it all the time, right? So after seeing you do it, now they can try to go do it because they've watched you do it so many times. So they watch everything, and you can't prevent that. So you just have to try to model the best behavior. And, you know, sometimes what you're teaching them is unintentional, even something as simple as how to get out of the door. So
You just got to hide it like it's your pin.
like, it's your pen.
Yeah, you just cover it with your body and like make sure they're not looking, so they never learn.
You know, what's funny is that later on, so like I said, I tell my youngest child all the time, you got the best version of a parent, because I learned a lot of lessons before it came to you. So I had learned throughout the years, you know, the baby gates that you could put up that you like keep them from going down the hall or in the bathroom, and you keep the door open or whatever.
Yeah.
So at one point I believed that they were ineffective. They were garbage. And it wasn't that they were garbage. It was that my kids had watched me lift up the bar and undo it. So they all knew how to do it. So they'd go over, they'd lift up the bar, the gate would be gone. Or they'd just climb over it, right? They saw an obstacle, they got over the obstacle, right? So by the time I got to my youngest kid, I realized you're not allowed to touch the gate. So when she would walk up to the gate, I would smack her hand, not very hard, but like, hey, like letting her know that there's a consequence to touching the gate, because I didn't want her to be on the other side of that gate. You know, it's funny, but you don't realize that they're watching everything, but they are. They're watching absolutely everything.
Do you think that you modeled the behavior that you wanted your kids to emulate? Always?
No, I don't think
Without
so.
fail?
No, definitely not. You know, even something as simple as, because let's be honest, when somebody falls, it's funny. I don't know why, but it's funny. And even something as simple as that, you know, like seeing somebody fall and maybe they got hurt and you laugh initially just because it's, you know, like a knee-jerk reaction. You know, even that, like you don't want your kids to think that it's okay when somebody gets hurt to laugh at them. And so even something as simple as that. Key component number 3 for raising a successful child is display positivity and optimism. So positivity and optimism can help children navigate life's challenges with resilience and confidence. Positivity refers to our current state, while optimism refers to the outlook of future events. Research has shown that even in poverty-stricken areas, children who are exposed to positivity and optimism have better academic performance, stronger relationships, and greater career achievement. That's pretty awesome. So this is demonstrated in people like the comedian Kevin Hart. You know, these children are also better able to cope with stress and adversity and are more likely to have a sense of purpose and meaning in their lives. Oprah Winfrey once said, "I know for sure that what we dwell on is who we become." She has openly talked about this and talked about how important positivity and optimism is for getting her through her tough childhood. So she was molested as a child. She was abused as a child. So help your children learn to reframe negative situations and focus on opportunities for growth and learning. Do you think that you display positivity and optimism?
I think I try to. I don't believe that I always did, especially when my kids were little and like learning. Obviously, road rage is like one of my Achilles heels. Yeah, it still is. It's one of those things that you just don't even realize it. You know what I'm saying? So you do it and your kids watch that. And so, you know, they mimic that same aggressive behavior when they drive. But then, you know, I watched my dad do it too. Like, you know.
You know, what's funny is, so my youngest child made a lot of money off of the curse word. So we had made a deal that every time you cursed, that I think it was like a quarter.
It was like $1.
So she'd be sitting in the car, cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching. She'd be racking up money.
Yeah, we had to stop that deal. I was going broke.
You're going broke. So according to the University of Pennsylvania's research, grit is actually tied to both positivity and optimism, as grit requires for you to have a clear and compelling vision of the future, and the optimism to believe that you can achieve the vision through sustained effort and hard work to really get the future that you want. And you can encourage grit in your children by helping them set goals and supporting them in their pursuit, even when they're not your goals or even when they're not the goals that you want for them. And sometimes, even when their goal, you know that they're not going to like it. So, it's always important to model grit by persisting through things, through your own challenges and trying to maintain, a positive outlook. Are you going to maintain a positive outlook all the time? Maybe not. It's hard to do. It's hard to be positive in difficult situations. It's not the easy route. But by doing so, you'll help your children develop the resilience and determination they need to succeed in life.
And I think this is an important conversation about parenting, because I think sometimes people get confused between grit and teaching kids to not quit. Right?
It's funny. I was just thinking about that.
Yeah, because sometimes what happens is you're like, well, my kid started this, and so they're going to finish it no matter what. No matter if they hate it, they started it, they got to finish it. And I think that teaches the wrong behavior, because I think it teaches your child not to take risks, not to take chances, because the repercussions are so disastrous and they're so long term that you can't recover from it. So then you don't want to try nothing new, because you don't.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to try something new, because if I don't like it, I have to do it for the next 10 years, So I think it's important. I think it's really important to allow your child to learn what they like and what they don't like, and then to say, okay, you signed up for this. I didn't think you were going to like hockey, but you signed up for it knowing you couldn't ice skate, so you're going to try it and you're going to do it. And if the kid doesn't like it and they realize that early on, give them an out. You know what I'm saying? Like, don't force them to play hockey for the next 4 years.
And honestly, their passion might be something else. And what you're doing is you're eliminating the ability for them to pursue that passion for a longer period of time, If you're like, hey, you picked to do this, and by picking to do this, you need to do it for the next 10 years, but their passion is something completely different, you're kind of setting them up, maybe not necessarily for failure, but you're not being supportive of what their passion is. And you're not teaching them to take a risk. And if they're not getting what they want, if it's not what they want, to change their course.
Yeah. Then that same kid ends up getting in a marriage where he's not happy or she's not happy, and they don't want to leave the marriage because they were taught not to quit, and you know what I'm saying, but it's not a good environment for them. So it's one thing to teach a kid not to quit, and then it's another one to teach a kid to have grit. And grit is all about wanting to do it, but it being hard. It's hard. I want to do it, but man, it's tough. But okay, just keep going. It's going to get easier. You know what I'm saying? As you build your strength, as you build your endurance, as you build the muscle memory, as you build the repetitiveness of the exercise, of the drill, of the whatever it is you're doing, you're going to get better. That's where you teach grit. And you teach your kids not to quit. And the one way that you can do that is if a kid wants to do sports and they don't like hockey, for example, you can give them a choice of other sports that they might want to try. Okay, you didn't like hockey. Well, you can either try basketball or you can try football. Which do you want to try next? You know what I'm saying? To try to find what you're passionate about. Or, hey, what is it that you want to do instead of hockey? Maybe he doesn't want to do another sport. Maybe he wants to dance. Or maybe he wants to, I don't know, swim. Or, you know, whatever it is that he wants to do. And then teach him grit in that activity, you know?
Sure.
Yeah. Key component number 4 of raising a successful child is don't transfer your burdens and your emotions onto your children. That's a huge one, And this happens a lot when parents, especially when parents split up, and parents go through a divorce, and maybe the ex-wife or the ex-husband is using the child as a weapon against the other parent.
So sad.
Yeah, and you have this little kid in the middle who has the burden of being weaponized or being the one who has to go with the parent that's sad, or the parent that's always crying, or the parent that can't get over the loss. And you know what I'm saying? Putting that burden on the child forces that child to feel those additional emotions.
And sometimes it's not even intentional. Sometimes it's, like kids pick up on emotions pretty easily, especially when they're close to you. And, if your kid sees you sad and crying and you say, why are you sad and crying? And so then you just unleash everything, they're going to be worried about you naturally because they love you.
What you end up doing is you end up conditioning your child to be a caregiver. Because now the kid wants to help you. The kid wants to take care of you.
Yeah,
all the time. Because they feel like you need the help. You need to be taken care of. Because you're struggling. Your child is not your counselor. You know? He or she is not your counselor. So don't unburden all your problems on your child. But on the flip side of that, it's important to teach your children how to have an emotion. And it's okay to say, Dad's sad because Dad went through something today. But it's going to be okay because Dad's sad because he lost his job today. And Dad doesn't know where he's going to find another job. You know what I'm saying? But don't you worry. I've got that. You know, you don't need to worry about it. I'm taking care of that. You know, it's just not good to come home and say, or to express anger and then not explain why you're angry, because it's so confusing to a child. The child doesn't understand why you're angry. Right. If you come home angry and you don't tell the child, the child thinks you're angry at them.
I know.
You know?
Are you angry at me? Did I do something?
And if you don't believe that, watch the next time that your significant other is angry. Hey, what's wrong? Because you think you did something. You didn't take out the trash. You didn't wash the car. What did I not do that is making you mad at me? It's not you at all. I'm upset because, my favorite TV show got canceled or whatever. I think it's important.
Yeah.
Children are highly sensitive to emotional signals of those around them and can easily pick up on stress, anxiety, and other negative emotions. Children often do not have the emotional resources yet to handle their own issues in addition to the issues of their parents. This is like taking weight from your rucksack or your backpack and that you carry through life and placing it into their backpack. Research has shown that the psychological phenomenon known as emotional contagion is indeed accurate. You catch the emotional state of those around you, and if you're an empath, it's even worse. As parents, we should be finding our own sources of support and finding ways to manage our emotional states and not unpacking that on our kids. Don't unpack your backpack or your rucksack through life on your journey into your child's backpack. The weight gets too heavy and too uncomfortable. When we model managing our own emotions in a healthy way, we are managing resiliency and coping, and this will result in our children developing the emotional intelligence along with those same coping strategies. Do you have experiences like this? Or have you ever had an experience like this?
Well, yeah, I've definitely had a few experiences with my kids throughout the years, and you don't realize your impact, and it's sad when you do. It's sad when you realize your impact when you're displaying certain emotions in front of them, especially if it's anger for somebody. Like if you have some feelings towards somebody or you have a disconnect with somebody, especially if it's a family member, sharing that with them can really make them uncomfortable, because more than likely they love that family member, right? So now they're feeling like, okay, I'm in between two people who are fighting that I care about, and they don't want to choose who's more important because they love you both, And one thing that I've tried to be, because you're not going to always be able to hide your emotions, you're just not. And one thing that I've tried to do that I've gotten better at through the years is to explain when I'm feeling a certain way and to discuss it. So I don't just say, well, I'm mad at so-and-so because they did this, this, and this. I say, I'm upset because it hurts me, and this is why. And I don't think they intended it, to be that way, but this is why it bothers me. And so I'm going to address it and I'm going to fix it. And I feel like that's better than just being upset and not explaining or unpacking your bag into their bag. Because if you don't deal with it, it stays in your bag. And you don't want to take that and put it in their bag.
Have you ever felt like you transferred your emotions to any one of your kids, like unintentionally?
I think so. I would say probably my older kids. Matter of fact, I would say probably my oldest son, probably the most. And, it's really embarrassing as a parent. You lose your cool and you say or do things that impact them. And we were discussing some things, and obviously your kids don't know what happened years ago. And I got mad and I said some things, and, my son's like, don't talk about my dad. And what's unfortunate is that you can't take that back. Once you've taken it and you put it in their bag, they're responsible for taking it out of the bag now. You can't just go in and grab it like they have it. So it's important, obviously, to try not to do it. And, if you have those experiences, try to navigate that situation with your kids so that they understand at least, hey, I shouldn't have put that on your, I shouldn't have put that weight on you. I'm just upset and I'll work this out. I'll take care of this. And then that allows for them to take that out of their bag. Now they don't have the weight of, how are you feeling? Are you okay? I've got to help you. If you do make a mistake, try to make it right.
How do you balance that with also trying to be honest with your children and like be truthful?
Well, I think that you have to gauge your children's maturity. And I'm a big believer that we as a society can place limitations on our kids at any age. I saw an article the other day where a 9-year-old graduated high school, and somebody is going to say, he's too young to go to college. He's going to be around people who are 18 and 19 and 20 and whatever. And even my youngest daughter, she's moved around so much. She tells me all the time she's been to 12 schools. So when we got to Texas and she looked at all of her classes and she looked at the requirements for Texas, she realized that in her junior year, she was taking all the classes she needed to graduate except one. So I went into the school to talk to the counselor, and I said, hey, is there any way that instead of her doing this elective that she doesn't need, that she can take this class? And I was so shocked, and I guess I shouldn't be, but I was so shocked by her response, because her response was, you realize that she's going to miss the whole senior experience, and she's going to miss everything that they do senior year. And I don't think that the principal is going to approve that, because that's a big deal. To who? Who's that a big deal to? That's a year that she could be working on her passion, or, that she could be starting college. And she even made the comment, you realize that she's going to be 17 when she starts college. So what difference does that make? And so I think that you really have to gauge your children's maturity level, and the better job that you do at utilizing some of these things that we're giving you today, the better that they'll be at maturing, and maybe they're more advanced. Like I can tell you, when my youngest daughter was probably like 9 or 10, I could trust that if she went on a flight, that she would stay with the person that was supposed to stay with her, and that she would get on the right plane. Now, transfer that over to my son when he was like 15, and I was so worried he was going to miss his flight, you know? But their level of what I had seen in their maturity was different, and sometimes that's going to be the case. So
Girls just naturally mature faster than boys anyway.
yeah, I think so. And who knows? Maybe that's a myth. Maybe we make that up. But
No, I think that from my experience, what I've seen is typically daughters are just a little bit more mature than boys. Boys are a little bit more rambunctious. They're still like, I don't know, in like a game stage at certain ages. Like, I'm not saying all boys. I'm just saying,
Right.
The average boy.
And so, those are the things that I have tried throughout the years, obviously better later, to take into account when sharing information, when you want to be honest. And so I've told my kids before, okay, listen, you're to the age now where I'll be completely honest with you. So ask whatever questions you want to ask, and I'll be honest, I'll be truthful. And then you can follow up after that with any questions that you have, but you can't do it at an age where they don't understand emotion and they don't understand how to address your emotion in theirs.
Yeah, or even the concept that you're talking about. Like, if you're talking
Right.
about marriage, how does a 4-year-old even understand marriage? Like, they don't understand the concept of marriage.
Right.
They don't even understand the concept of a relationship yet,
And what's sad is that sometimes, you'll have one parent that'll say, so you split up, and maybe there was major reasons why you split up, something that a 4-year-old, 5-year-old's not going to understand. And more than likely they're not going to understand that. And so one parent says, oh, well, mommy didn't love me, or daddy didn't love me anymore. And so then your child is feeling bad, and they're like, but mommy, or but daddy, why do you not love mommy or daddy anymore?
Yeah.
And that's harmful to both parents, because now the child's like, you're hurting and you're going to continue hurting until mommy and daddy are back together. And then the other parent who shared the information, or the other parent who didn't share the information, is stuck with, well, they're too young to hear the real story. It's not that, mommy didn't love daddy or daddy didn't love mommy. This is the real reason. You can't tell them that,
Yeah. Plus, it's really not true. It's just more complicated than that. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? Like, it's not that I didn't love you. It's that, things happened.
Right.
But you can't tell that to someone who doesn't understand relationships. Like,
Can't.
they're not matured enough to that level to be able to understand the concept of it.
For sure. Key component number 5 for raising a successful child is to maintain an authoritative parenting style. Now, this parenting style directs children rationally by being positive and responsive to children's emotional needs, but also sets clear boundaries and expectations for their behavior. This parenting style actually creates a sense of structure and predictability, which translates into their feelings of security and their development of a strong sense of self-discipline. Research conducted by the University of California at Berkeley has shown that children of authoritative parents tend to have higher levels of academic achievement, better social skills, and lower rates of behavioral problems compared to children of parents of other styles. This is because authoritative parents provide children with the support and guidance needed to thrive, while also giving them the freedom to explore and learn from their mistakes. And I kind of want to stop and talk about this for a little bit, because
We're out of time. Nah, just kidding.
because parents aren't going to understand. Obviously, I didn't understand what that means. And so, I said earlier, I've never been a helicopter parent. So I am not going to do everything for you. And first of all, when you have that many kids, it's impossible. Okay. You can't be a helicopter parent when you have that many kids. You just can't. You will drive yourself absolutely nuts. So I was the parent who was like, the school calls and said, hey, your kid did, X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, okay. So then I asked my kid, what did you do? I'm not the parent that says, oh, well, it must have been the other kid, and you go up to the school and you kind of try to get involved, or, fight their battles. Or you're the parent who goes through their phone, or you're the parent who goes through all the stuff in their room. I don't do that. I place trust in you. And if you violate that trust, there's a serious consequence, that's going to last for a long time. So, and I explained that. Again, this wasn't something that I knew early on. This was something later. The more that you parent in that way, I think the more damage you do for your children progressing to the battlefield. So you're preventing them from getting certain tools, and you're preventing them from learning certain behaviors that are very important to being able to be successful on the battlefield.
I think it's important to understand that authoritative parents is not extreme. Like we're not talking about like micromanaging your child,
Right.
or authority to the point where like your child has to say yes, sir, no, ma'am, and can't move without your permission. And there are some parents that are super militant, right? Super militant to the point where your child is just terrified of doing the wrong thing, and that child never learns to make decisions because they're never given the option to make decisions. They're just dictated to, right? It's almost like in leadership. If you have a leader who's always telling you, do this and do it this way, do this and do it this way, you're never really empowering the people that you're leading to solve problems or to
Absolutely.
find issues on their own, or all they're doing is waiting for a command to execute.
And then that's the employee that you can't promote to a certain level
Yeah.
because they can't perform certain tasks on their
Nope.
own, which is required at certain levels.
You can't do it
So-
because you haven't learned how.
Right.
Well, but as a child, when you do it to a child, you take away their ability to problem solve. You take away their ability to conduct conflict resolution. When you're too lax, on the flip side of that, when you're too lax and you provide no discipline for your children, and you're like, oh, my kids are my friends, and everybody's just super happy, then what happens is your kid has no boundaries. Right. And then what happens is that as they're trying to find their boundaries, they go over the limit on stuff. You know what I'm saying? Like now you're not going to bed when you're supposed to. So you're in school and you're falling asleep in class because you don't have a bedtime. You know what I'm saying?
You don't have boundaries.
Yeah, you don't have boundaries. You go out with your friends. You don't come home until 10, 11, 1 o'clock in the morning. Like, no one knows where you're at. You're exposing yourself to unsafe situations. Like there's things that are negative from being too lax. I think it's important to understand that authoritative parenting is all about setting expectations for your children and then holding them accountable to those expectations and saying, hey, I expect for you to clean your room. It's your room. You don't need to come clean my room. You just need to clean yours. So because you live in that room, I expect for you to clean it. And if you don't, then these are the consequences of not doing what you're responsible for. Taking a shower, doing your homework, those things. And you can't always be the parent that says, hey, did you do your homework? Hey, sit down right now and do your homework. Like your child needs
Then they don't worry about forgetting. They know that you're going to remind them.
yeah, they're not going to do it until you tell them to do it.
Right.
Like, well, my mom didn't tell me to do it, so I didn't do it. But if your child knows that when they come home, they've got a routine, and this is the time period when they do their homework, and this is the consequence if that homework is not done when it's supposed to be, you don't have to tell the child to do their homework. You just say, bring me your homework. I need to check your homework. Oh, I haven't done it yet. Oh, you were watching TV. You were outside playing. You were on your Xbox. Okay, well, guess what? Now there's no Xbox. Now there's no TV. Now there's no outside playing. You take those things away that the child enjoys. And you go, when you learn to follow the plan, all those things will come back, I also think that parents sometimes make the mistake of making a threat and then
Not following through.
not following through. And so what that tells the kid is, well, I haven't reached the threshold of being punished
The
yet.
likelihood of this happening is
Yeah,
very
it's
low.
unlikely. So your kid is like a risk management manager. He's like, okay, so I actually cannot do my homework for 3 days before my mom can't take it anymore and she beats me. Like, you know what I'm saying? So I'll skip for 2 days, and on the third day I'll do my homework. Like, So it's really important that as a parent that you don't make threats, that you don't plan on following through. Like you don't tell your kid, hey, if you don't do your homework, I'm going to murder you. Like you're not going to murder your child for not doing their homework, right? Or, hey, if you don't do your homework, you're going to sleep outside in the yard tonight. Like, if you don't clean your room, I'm going to put you in a tent out in the yard. You're not going to put your kid in a tent out in the yard. You're just not going to do it. So don't make that threat, because when you can't follow through, the child starts to understand that it's all talk. There's really no repercussions coming after that. You're not going to do it.
I got real upset with my son one time, and honestly, I don't even remember what. But I do remember telling him, if you want to be gangster, I'm going to drop you in the ghetto. So I dropped him off in a bad neighborhood. Guys, that was not smart. That was not smart at all. And then guess what? Then I realized after I did it, first of all, how's he going to get home? Because he's far away from home. And he was maybe 15 at the time. And I can't let him sit out here all night. So, I pull up to him. I'm like, get in the car. Now he doesn't want to get in the car. Now I'm like, fudge, I done messed up.
You done gave away your power.
Yep.
Yeah.
True.
So, and I've been in that situation before, like where I've told my son, hey, if you do this, I'm going to let you out and you're going to walk the rest of the way home, knowing it's within walking distance. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
I know it's not that it's going to hurt him. It's going to just be an inconvenience for him. You know what I'm saying? But I can follow through on that threat if he, you know what I'm saying? But I wouldn't say that if I'm like on an 8-hour drive and we're like halfway through the drive and I'm like, hey, if you say one more word, I'm going to pull over and you're going to walk the rest of the way. He's not going to walk the rest of the 4-hour drive. And I'm not going to put him out that way. You know what I'm saying? I think it's really important to be careful when you're telling your kid what the consequence of an action is, that it's actionable and that you then follow through on that action, because if you don't, you lose power. You give your kid the power that you should be holding on to yourself. And the repercussion should always match the infraction.
What's happened.
Yeah. So you're not gonna whip your kid because they, I don't know, left the cereal box on the counter. You're not getting a whooping for that. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, you're gonna take them through a relearning process. Hey, you got to put the cereal away. It creates more work for your mom. She has a job. She's gonna come home tired. Don't put it away. Put it away. And I think that if the punishment doesn't match the infraction, then it feels personal.
That's true.
Yeah. Now it feels like you just don't like me. You have a problem with me.
Or it just feels like you just like spanking
beating
me.
on me. Yeah, you just like beating on me. You smack me for no reason. I didn't even do anything. I can probably recall more whoopings that I got as a kid that I didn't deserve than the ones that I did deserve. I forget about the ones I deserved. I deserved it. I don't even think about those anymore. But the ones where I didn't deserve it, I feel like there was an injustice done. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, I was accused of a crime I didn't commit.
So we know that justice is a high character trait of
Yeah,
yours.
for sure. Key component number 6 of raising a successful child is empower your children to raise their sword. All right? And that really means empowering your kids to be strong enough to defend themselves. Parents, give your children the reins. Remember that you're preparing your child for the battlefield of life, and they're going to experience that life without you. You're not going to be there every day. Yes, you're going to be in their life as they mature and they become adults, but you're not going to be there to make those decisions for them. You're not going to be there to tell them, do this, don't do that, especially as they start their own families and they have their own children. Children of parents who allow them to take the lead are able to build independence and practice self-regulation skills. In fact, research performed by the National Academy of Sciences found that children exhibiting these skills went on to be healthier, have more money, not have substance abuse issues or criminal behavior. So back off and don't be a helicopter parent. Allow your child to figure things out without you so that they learn the ability to problem solve. They learn the ability to control their attention or to manage their emotions. Limited skills in this area can create a much higher probability of children doing poor in school, having issues socially, doing drugs, or getting into trouble legally. Too much parental instruction or direction can backfire and cause a child to lose focus, according to a study led by Stanford University. Children with parents who stepped in to provide instructions frequently displayed more difficulty regulating their emotions later. Oftentimes, parents try to exert psychological control over their children. Psychological control is when you try to control a child's emotional state or their beliefs. Research conducted by the University College London revealed that children of parents exerting psychological control of their children had a lower mental well-being throughout their adulthood, and that the effect is similar to the death of a close friend or relative. Who would want their children to experience that?
Sad.
Yeah, it is really sad. Instead, parents should maintain an authoritative parenting style that we spoke about earlier by directing their child rationally. Set clear boundaries and expectations for the behavior, such as those that can be harmful, while also being positive and responsive to their emotional needs. It's absolutely okay to set a curfew, assign chores, and expect homework to be completed within a specific time frame. Research conducted by Harvard University on having children contribute to the household with chores, such as doing your own laundry or taking out the trash, results in the realization that they have to do work in life to be a part of life. Let's discuss this a little bit. What's your experience in this area, Crystal?
Well, I definitely always haven't been good at this. By not being that helicopter parent, I think I've learned to allow for my child to deal with things in a fashion where it's them dealing with it. And I see that you empower them in that way. So if you, and something simple, you know, like you could tell your kid, go clean the bathroom. Well, you don't have to tell your kid, use this solution, wipe in this direction. Let them figure it out, you know, let them figure it out. Or have you seen two kids, you know, fighting, like two toddlers fighting? Have you ever seen two toddlers fight? And it's kind of funny to watch. And as long as they're not banging each other over the head with something dangerous, watch how they work it out, you know? Typically, they can work it out, even if one of them's, you know, doing their little fake cry, because sometimes they do fake cries. You know, watch and see how they approach that situation and direct them, guide them, you know?
I think it's important to know that those are all teachable moments for children.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's important to then after that conflict to sit them down and coach them on what you saw, whether it was good or bad. To say, hey, I saw that you were having a hard time with that lawnmower, and I saw that you did this, and that was that you solved that very well. Like reinforce that behavior with encouragement, and say, and even ask them, what did you learn? Hey, you were cutting the grass, and I saw that you were going in zigzags. What did you learn about that? You know what I'm saying? Because you had to cut it. You had to cut it again because you missed a bunch. You know what I'm saying? Like, so what did you learn in that process? As opposed to going and saying, hey, this is how you cut the grass. You cut it like this way, then you come back the same way. Then, you know what I'm saying? Like, and taking the child's ability to figure it out from the equation. When you find them doing something that's not correct or that could have been done differently or better, then sitting that child down and going, okay, what did we learn? Why did you do it that way? What was your thought process? Why did you approach it from this? What were you thinking? You know what I'm saying? Not from a negative, like, what were you thinking? But more of a like, how were you thinking about this problem that caused you to approach it from this angle and not from this other angle? You know what I'm saying? Because that will help the child understand that there's more than one way to solve the problem. I can cut the grass diagonally. You know, I can cut it fast. I can cut it slow. I can cut it with the lawnmower. I can cut it with the scissors. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, there's so many different variables of cutting the grass. Why did you choose the one that you did? And what did you learn? And yeah, what did you learn from that? And how will you handle it next time that you're told to cut the grass? You know?
For sure. You know, we talk a lot about children being physically abused and how impactful that is. And we don't talk a lot about the emotional abuse or that psychological, you know, manipulation. That's very damaging. And, you know, I don't want for my children to have any kind of feeling that's similar to the death of a close friend or relative. You know, that's a very sad, low vibrational state to be in. And I don't want them to feel that way.
Have you ever experienced something like that? Like, have you ever seen somebody else do that to a kid, or like how does that look? Like, what does that present as?
You know, honestly, I think I see it the most in parents who split up. And I think they try to exert some kind of control, and they do it in a psychological manner, maybe telling them, if you don't cook and clean, you're not going to be a good wife. If you don't spend X amount of time with your kids at home, you're not a good husband. Those are things that you might think that you're being a good parent. You might think that you're sharing with them, you know, like words of wisdom.
Yeah.
But you're not, and you're boxing them in. It really is what you're doing, and you're trying to get them to believe a certain set of, you know, of belief. What about you?
In terms of psychological, I don't think that I ever was like psychologically controlling of my kids. Like, I didn't ever try to make them believe anything that I wanted them to believe. But I know that sometimes when parents are uber religious, like they can force that religion on their children and then use it as a way to scare them to be good. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, oh, you're going to go to hell.
Yeah.
Like, hey, you're the devil, you know? like you're the spawn of Satan. And maybe he is. He keeps climbing on the couch. He must be a spawn of Satan. But I think that like we do that, and then we use fear as a way to control children. And fear, you can impart so much fear into children that it impacts how they develop as adults.
That's true.
You know, and then they can be fearful.
You know, you're actually born without fear.
Yeah. There's only two things that you're afraid of when you're born.
What?
Falling. You have a natural reaction to falling, like your body responds naturally, and loud sounds. if you
really
make a
interesting.
loud sound, a kid will like turn and react to
Right,
that
even
loud
a
sound.
baby. That's true.
Yeah. Those are the two things that you're born with and being afraid of. But other than that, and I think those are just genetically coded for survival. You know what I'm saying? Like if you hear a roar, oh, it's a lion.
Right.
I need to learn to crawl.
Loud is bad.
Yeah.
You know, and funny, the funny thing is that, well, and it's not funny, but when we're parenting, we don't realize that we're instilling these fears.
Yeah.
So when we're saying things like, if you get on that, you're going to break your arm, so
Yeah.
then they develop this fear of maybe heights or, and that wasn't your intention. You wanted them to be safe. And so you thought that was a good way of having them be safe,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, and I think there's an absolute there. Like, oh, if you climb on that tree, you're going to break your arm. I think there's an absolute statement there that if a child takes it verbatim, like I can see that becoming a fear of heights. Like, oh, if I climb on a tree, I'm going to break my arm. But if you were to say, hey, there's a possibility that if you climb on that tree, nothing will happen to you. But there's a possibility that you could fall off that tree. And if you do, the possibility that you could be fine. There's
Right.
also a possibility that you could break an arm. Like
You can also instill a limited belief in them
yeah,
by telling them certain things.
sure.
And that's hard to eliminate out of your system as you're getting older.
Yeah. Do you think you had any limited beliefs instilled in you when you were a kid?
Yeah, there's one that I remember. And my dad would feel bad to even know this, but
I'm gonna send him this podcast. See,
I had a little dancing and singing group. I know that's hard to believe. But friends were all black. And when we were practicing dancing, my dad took me for us to practice dancing. And my dad said, they have rhythm. You do not have any rhythm. And so after that, I always thought, I don't want to dance in front of people. Like, I don't have any rhythm. And your parent says that, and they don't even realize that what they're saying is damaging,
yeah,
And that's something that can sit with the child. You don't want them to have a limited belief,
yeah,
It doesn't look like you're putting in the same amount of work as them. That would be something better to say,
yeah,
If you put in a little bit more work, then you're going to be the best dancer out of all three of you, or you guys are going to be dancing, at the same level. Whatever it is, but
yeah.
instead of instilling that limited belief.
Yeah, and it was also unintentionally negative as well. Like the statement was unintentionally negative. Like, it was
Right.
like you can't or you don't is a negative statement as opposed to saying, hey, you could probably do better. You know what I'm saying? Hey, you could do better. I think you could do better. If he would have said, hey, your dancing needs some work. I think you could do better. Let's put you in a dance class.
Right.
Like that would have been more uplifting and more like, oh, I can improve. My dad thinks I can do better than this. Like, But I think as parents, we don't even realize it. We'll say things like, you run so slow, you're a slow runner, or like, hey, you're getting chubby. Like we do little things like that, thinking that they're harmless words, but we don't understand the psychological impact on that child
That's true.
who hears that and goes, oh, I'm fat. You know what I'm saying?
That's true,
And then
for
starts to
sure.
think, well, I'm just a fat person. I can't lose weight. Like, you know what I'm saying? As opposed to saying, hey, you've been eating unhealthy and we need to change your diet so that you can stay in good shape because I know that you love playing football and it's going to require you to, you know what I'm saying? Like there's positive ways to communicate that where it doesn't become this negative psychological like cage for your child,
Right.
Yeah, I think with my ex-wife, I think she experienced that young in her age when she was in school. I think some teacher told her she couldn't read or something like that when she was like, I don't know, like in kindergarten or first grade, somewhere young, really young. But it stuck with her and it was such an impactful negative thing that the teacher said to her that it made her terrified to speak in public. And she won't read in public at all. Like, and it was such a limiting belief that it stopped her from like applying for like leadership roles because she didn't want to have to talk in front of a group or address, a team or things like that. So something that happened when she was like in first or second grade has impacted her for 50 years. Yeah. So it's
crazy.
Yeah, it is. And those things are hard to pull out and eliminate. Like, what I'm saying, it's really hard. The biggest area of empowerment for a child is allowing them to make decisions. Even small ones can be a powerful way to empower them and build their confidence. Just to clarify, we're not talking about big decisions, but even controlling what friends they hang out with, what time their homework is done, etc. My youngest child didn't have a bedtime. We told her that so long as she got everything done, she was supposed to, wasn't falling asleep at school and maintaining good grades, we would leave her bedtime selection to her. We never had to tell her to do her homework or chores. Everything was done before bed. It's even smart when your child approaches you with a problem that you listen without offering advice right away. This causes your child to figure things out, even how they can approach things differently. This develops problem solving and critical thinking skills. Research published in Psychology Today by Laura DeSauer indicates that by not letting your children make decisions, it turns them into a codependent adult. These children tend to seek out relationships where someone else has the power and control. Scary, huh?
It is. You know, I've been watching this show. Well, obviously we've been watching this show.
Yeah.
Can't remember what it's called. My Lover, My Killer.
My Lover, My Killer.
Yeah. And it's crazy to me to see how this plays out in some of those instances. Not in all of them, but because over time you could be psychologically groomed. But it's crazy to see that somebody would want to be with somebody who directs them in every way. Like, some people want that, and that's where it comes from. And so knowing that, you don't want to set your child up for that. Don't.
I think we do it unintentionally, where we teach our kids obey your elders. When we say
So
obey
then they
your
don't want to
elders,
tell you when an elder touched them because that's their elder. They were telling me what to do, and I was doing what I was supposed to do.
Yeah, it's really the wrong message to say that. Maybe that made sense, like in the village back in Egypt or something. But nowadays the world is a different place, and it's important to tell your kids that you can't trust everyone who's an adult. Everyone who's an adult is not going to be good for you. It's not going to be your friend. It's not going to want what's best for you. So I think that's really important. But in terms of decisions and allowing your kids to make decisions, it's important to know that your kids, when they ask for something, when they say, "Hey, can I go outside and play?" You can say, "Okay, you can either go outside and play, or you can go cut the grass and I'll pay you $5." Right? That's a choice that kid has. And now the kid's thinking, okay, do I go out and play, or man, I really want that $5 because then I can do these other things that and now they have a choice. You know what I'm saying? And if you want to dissuade them from something, like if they want to do something that you don't want them to do, you can always give them a better choice. Hey, I really want to go spend the night at my friend's house. I don't really feel comfortable with my daughter spending the night at her friend's house. Hey, you could go spend the night at your friend's house, or your friends can spend the night here and we can go to the video game and we can go get some pizza. Like, you know what I'm saying? You make it a little bit better of an option. So they're still choosing, I really want to go there. Okay. If that's okay with you, then you can allow it. If it's not okay, then you just shut it down. You know what I'm saying? You don't have to give them a choice at all. It's really good to be able to give a kid a choice. And when you do shut them down, it's important to give them other options. You don't just say no. You can just say no. That's how I was raised. I would say, hey, can I go to the movies? No. You can't. Why not? Because I said so. That was what I got, right? But it's way better to say, no, you can't go to the movies because these reasons that you can't go to the movies. Now you understand, well, my parents is not being mean. They're worried about my safety. But you can invite a friend over to watch a movie, or we can all go to have ice cream. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, you could give them an alternative to what they want to do as opposed to just saying no.
It's really good. Even when it comes to things like money, let's say school clothes shopping, telling your child, hey, you got $500. That's for everything for this school year. Yeah. So choose wisely. Yeah.
And that's such a life skill.
It is.
It's such a life skill to teach your kid how to budget by I didn't have that option when I was a kid. My mom took me to the store and she got me 3 pair of pants. She got me 3 shirts. She got me 1 pair of shoes, 1 pack of underwears, 1 pack of t-shirts, and that was it. And I didn't have a choice of any of it. And now the world has changed a little bit. And so now, you give your kid a $300 budget or a $500, whatever it is, whatever the budget is for that child. And you go, okay, you figure it out. And the kid knows, well, I need a pair of pants for every day of the week. I know I need to have a shirt for every day of the week. So this is how much I can spend on each one. And I also got to get 2 pair of shoes. Like, you know what I'm saying? Now that kid is figuring out. They're not going, hey, I need the $500 pair of shoes. Okay. Okay, that's all you're going to have. Last year's clothes and a new pair of shoes.
Hope them shoes last you all year.
But it's your choice.
Right.
It's your choice. And if those $500 pair of shoes are really important to you, you're going to have the consequences of that decision.
Do you feel like that was an area where in your parenting style where you allowed for your children to make decisions? Did you give them that option?
I don't know that I always gave them an option, but whenever I found an opportunity for them to learn something, I would give them an option. I prefer to give them the option than to make a decision for them. Here's a perfect example. My daughter was deciding to go to college, and I preferred for her to go locally, but she really wanted to go to Puerto Rico. And she wanted to live with my parents there and go to school in Puerto Rico because she wanted to learn Spanish. She wanted to be in a different culture. She's all about traveling. And I really thought that the culture perspective of it would be good for her to go someplace where they spoke Spanish all the time and she would learn that. But I also knew that living with my parents was a toxic environment because I grew up in that environment. And so I knew that she was going to struggle there with that.
And she still talks about this.
Yeah, she does. She does. But, you know, and that was a financially straining decision
For you.
but it was something that she had to experience to understand. And you know what? I may have been wrong. She might have been there. She might have been like, wow, this is amazing. This was great. Unfortunately, that's not how it played out. It played out the same way that I thought it would. But I felt like not giving her that choice and not allowing her to experience that would have never showed her the value of the benefits of going to school here with her family, where her family was, with her family. And so, you know, she went for a semester and she hated it even before the semester got done, but she finished the semester to show you grit. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
To
She
speak
wanted
to
to stick
grit.
it out.
Yeah,
She wanted
but,
to-
but I didn't tell her, well, hey, you made the bed, now you have to lay in it, so you're going to be there for 4 years until you finish that degree. You know what I'm saying? I'm not going to put my kid through torture for 4 years so that she learns not to quit. You know what I'm saying? Like, no, she realized she made a bad decision. She overestimated the experience, and she was ready to come back home. And so, you know, we brought her back home, and she finished college in the U.S.
And you know, by providing them the ability to make a decision, there's a much better learning lesson than you're just telling them, no, you can't do it. This is why. I'm not
Yeah.
going to let you do it. My youngest daughter wanted to do cheerleading one year. And I had given her the option of, you know, what sport or whatever it is that she wanted to do. I'd actually tried to tell her, and it's funny because she does jiu-jitsu now. I had tried to get her to do wrestling because wrestling is a pretty easy scholarship to get, especially for a female. So she's like, you know, no, I wanna do cheerleading. Okay. I didn't think she was gonna like it. We got her all the stuff she needed for cheerleading. It cost us like $2,000. I had to go to all these booster club meetings. And let me tell you, you know how long her little cheerleading thing lasted? It lasted one term at school, not even a year. One term at school, she had enough. She's like, no, I don't like being a cheerleader. I don't want to be a cheerleader. And the funny thing is, recently I was laughing about it, and she said, you know what's funny is I watched something, and they made it look so cool, and I thought that's how it was going to be, and it wasn't like that.
Yeah. But I feel like if you would have taken that option away and said, no, you're not going to be a cheerleader, the rest of her life, she would have been like, man, if I would have just been a cheerleader,
Yeah.
my whole life would have been different. I would have had so many friends and I would have had this great experience. And like, you would have hated it.
Yeah.
I think that another time when I let a kid make a decision, I'm trying to think this through.
Didn't you make a deal with Alicia one time about money that had to do with you'd give her so much and she could get whatever it was with it, or she could get less and you would allow for her to invest?
I was trying to teach my daughter to invest. And so instead of saying, hey, you should invest your money, which is like what typically you would say, hey, you got this money, why don't you invest it? You got this Christmas money, why don't you invest it?
Right.
I was giving her money for clothes for school. And so what I was going to do was, I can't remember the amounts. I think I was going to give her $300. I was going to give her $500 for school clothes.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
$500.
I was going to give her $500 for school clothes. And so what I did was I was testing her. I said, I'm going to give her $300, and I'm going to tell her that if she chooses to invest a portion of that money, then I'm going to give her $500. So it was to test her. I was trying to reward the behavior of making a decision to invest over not. So I said, so she didn't know this. So I said, hey, I'm going to give you $300 for school clothes, but I think you should invest $50 of that in stocks, you know? And so I said, but you don't have to make the decision now. You could think about it. Yeah, you only have $250 for school clothes, but that $50 could turn into $100 or $150. Like, you never know what it could grow to. And so she thought about it a whole day. The next day she came back and she says, hey, I decided I'm going to go ahead and invest the $50. and I'm just going to use a $250 on school clothes. And I said, okay, I'm going to take the $50 and I'm going to invest it, and I'm going to give you $500 instead. So that behavior reinforced the positives of investing. You know what I'm saying? Because you don't know what you're going to get for that investment.
Plus, it was her decision and not yours.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
And the funny thing is that she's been investing ever since.
Yeah.
And a matter of fact, it's how she helped buy her car.
Yeah.
And it was funny because I didn't know a lot of the stuff on the platform that she was using. It was Robinhood. And I know you have a lot of experience with it. And so she got into looking at different stocks. She researched them, and she'd be sending messages in the middle of the night saying, "Hey, this stock is going up. Go look. See how much money you made." Or, "Hey, this stock is really low. Go in there and buy some stuff." So it was really cool to see that at her age that she was doing that, because there's adults that know nothing about investing and don't know the importance of investing, and that was a good learning lesson for her for sure.
Yeah, I think it's a life lesson that she'll always have and that she'll always take. And I wish I could have had that. I wish I could have shared that lesson with my other kids. You know what I'm saying? When we didn't have a platform like that to be able to do that, and I feel like that was like a missed opportunity, like to teach them how to invest. And like I just didn't know. I didn't know what I didn't know. A lot of times I feel like if I would have had kids now, the lessons that I could teach are so much more valuable than the lessons that I knew when we were all growing up together. Like we all knew the same stuff.
Yeah. I joke that my kids are going to be down the hall at the nursing home because we're so close in age.
It's not a joke. It's going to be a fact.
Key component number 7 of raising a successful child is to let your child fail, but think of effort over failure. So as you heard earlier in my personal story, I know it's tough to watch your child learn a tough lesson. It is, but it's a lesson. Failure is part of the journey, and even on the battlefield, do you know how many U.S. soldiers died, unnecessarily on the battlefield before we realized that not just medics, but all soldiers needed to know the importance of controlling bleeding, even before providing treatment for the airway? Thousands. 90% of almost 5,000 casualties died of our hemorrhage-associated injuries. This was a massive failure and one that impacted a lot of people. So 100% of soldiers learn how to control bleeding.
You say that too, and I think about how they've changed the active shooter training with the police to show
They've added hemorrhage control because so many people are unnecessarily dying. Yeah,
so the police are clearing buildings and they're walking past shot victims and they're not providing any type of hemorrhage control. So those people are dying unnecessarily. So they're bleeding out while the police hunt down the shooter. They're not providing any type of first aid. So we're even learning that lesson even in an urban environment. Yeah.
And I actually was reading today, they've come out with some new stuff that they're going to test out on the battlefield this year. No, 2025. I think they released it to the hospitals in the military sector to test out for areas that you can't like put a tourniquet on or really control real well with pressure, like the armpit. So that's really cool. It's interesting to see. And through these failures, had we not have had these failures, we wouldn't have had these advances. And one day, those failures are going to result in a lot of success stories for people making it out of situations that before you just wouldn't expect for them to make it out of. And that's pretty amazing. So research published in Psychology Today, not allowing a child to fail is so damaging that it continues into adulthood. Remember that you're preparing your child for the battlefield, not preparing the battlefield or life for them. In a poll conducted by the New York Times, 75% of parents still perform such things as scheduling appointments for their children between the ages of 18 and 28. That's crazy.
Wow, it's crazy.
I'm too busy. We have to be very conscious about how we respond to our children. And one of those ways is how we respond to failure, because it's equally important because it can have a significant impact on their emotional well-being and future success. Just like the story I told earlier with my dad, knowing what to say, like saying the same thing, but knowing how to say it in a way that isn't damaging. Have you ever responded, after a high score or a win with, you're so talented or you're naturally gifted? I have, and believe it or not, it's wrong. So Stafford University conducted research spanning decades. And what they found was that where children think success comes from predicts their attainment. So some children believe that success is determined by genetics, natural talent, or natural intelligence. And that's not true. These children tend to think either you have it or you don't, and that's it. And it's a fixed mindset. And even for the children who the parents are saying, you know, oh, you're so natural at the sport that you're doing, they didn't try as hard because they're natural. They didn't think that they needed to stack anything on anymore, you know, be any more aggressive to improve themselves in that sport or in that subject in school.
I think I'm a little bit guilty of that because I always felt like my son was just naturally talented at sports, and so I would always say, "Oh, he's just natural." And you know what? It's funny because you don't even have to say it to your son. You could just say it to other people, and your kids hear it. Like, "Oh, my son's he's
That's
awesome."
true.
Like, you know what I'm saying?
Absolutely
He's
true.
he's a phenom on the football field. But now he's thinking, "Oh, I'm a phenom. I don't need to go to practice. I'm a phenom."
And you know what's funny? I did it a lot with my oldest son,
Yeah.
and I know one time in wrestling, so my son was, first of all, my son's done just about every sport. And at every sport, I kid you not, he's excelled at every sport. So he naturally has a physical ability to do very well in sports. And so when he did wrestling, my dad was super excited because my dad was a college wrestler and my dad likes wrestling. So my son kind of like, he wanted to make his grandpa proud. And, you know, so he kind of continued in wrestling for a while. But when he was wrestling, I would say things like, man, you're so talented. You're such a natural, you know, you're undefeated. Imagine how high you can go with this. And again, just like I've told my youngest daughter, I told him wrestling is an easier scholarship to get. And he wanted to play football, but it's a harder scholarship to get. I'm like, why don't you go for the wrestling scholarship? Which he didn't do. That's another story. But there was a kid who was on his wrestling team who wasn't near as good as a lot of the other kids. He wasn't undefeated because a lot of people on his wrestling team were undefeated. He wasn't undefeated, and he was actually a little small, so they kind of thought of him as like being the small one in the group. But this kid, I caught him walking home, and I asked him, you know, hey, can I give you a ride? Or your parents not coming to pick you up? He lived so far away from the school, but you know what? He was walking to and from practice. So knowing that, I told my son, I said, you know what? Hard work beats talent every time. So that kid, man, he's gonna be a phenomenal wrestler because he's putting in that extra work. He's having to do extra just to get there to practice. So practice is gonna mean that much more to him. You know, if you've walked 5 miles, you're gonna make sure you get out of your practice with what you want to get out of your practice. You know, you're not gonna go there and mess around. You're gonna go there and you're gonna be serious.
Yeah.
So reinforce a growth mindset where failure, although disappointing, it's an opportunity for growth instead of a fixed mindset, where failure is avoided at all costs. And, you know, you can achieve this by reminding your children when they do succeed in something, as little as scoring high on a test or even in a sport, you know, letting them know that it's a testament of their hard work and effort as opposed to just natural intelligence or talent. So you can whether they're naturally intelligent or maybe they're behind a little bit, maybe they're not as good as some of the other people. Either way, whether they're in one situation or the other, you're going to propel them to be even better. So when they fail, you can remind them that they can turn that around with hard work and effort.
I think where we learn that mindset is in school and with getting grades. You study and you get an F. Like, oh, you failed. So they teach you that failure is to be avoided and not to be pursued. The first place that I ever worked at where I learned that failure was acceptable was at Amazon. One of their values is fail fast. And when I first heard that, I was like, oh, what does that mean? Fail fast? Like, why would you want to fail quickly? Like, you know, but the value is all about being open to taking risks because the lessons are in the failure. There are some lessons in success. There are some lessons, but the best lessons always come through failure. And if you look at people who have succeeded in life, they've gotten there through a failure. They're learning every time. They're getting a little bit better, incrementally better, until they get to the point where they're so good that they're undeniably a champion. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
You've become great because you've failed so many times and you've learned so many lessons that now you've become a master.
And fixing. And you know what?
Absolutely.
What the funny thing is you'll see in sports, and I'll use Ronda Rousey as an example.
Yeah.
You know, you get to a point to where you think you're unstoppable. Like, I've achieved the top and nobody's going to get here. You can't think that. You cannot take a knee when you're in a competitive sport, because when you take that knee, somebody's going to pass you up, because somebody somewhere is going to be working harder than you if that's what you're doing. And at some point, they're going to pass you.
Conor McGregor said that one of the worst things you can do is become a champion, because once you become a champion, it's real easy to think you've made it. I've gotten here.
Right.
I've gotten to the top of the mountain, and not understanding that you now have to stay there. Like, it's not simple to just stay there, because now the other greats are coming for that championship too. Like,
and you know what? A lot of people who go to the Olympics experience, like just Simone Biles recently, a psychological or an emotional breakdown where they have this severe sense of needing to win, imagine that pressure. Like, the whole country is expecting for you to bring back a gold medal. Not just your mom and dad, not just your family, you know, the whole country. Yeah. That's a lot of pressure. You know, that's a lot of pressure to have. And it's unfair, but we don't do it intentionally. You know, it's not something that we do out of a bad place.
Yeah. The school system obviously needs to change in a way where failure is not seen as a negative. Even when you perform poorly,
right?
There should be a lesson there that can then be expounded on for that child, and say, hey, you got this answer wrong. What were you thinking? How did you research this? Where did you find this answer? Why did you think this was the correct answer? You know, there's a lesson there that we don't really take the time to teach. Our school systems aren't built for that.
You know what's funny is there's something my dad used to tell me that used to upset me so much, because I used to think, he's not really listening to me. Like, he's not caring and letting me be like sad, you know, or letting me be disappointed. So I would tell him about a failure, and he would say, you're a tough cookie. You're going to figure it out. And I started thinking, man, I must be the most crunchy, stiff, stale cookie that there is, because I keep falling and falling and falling and failing and failing, and it sucks, you know? But the funny thing is, I was a tough cookie, you know? And I don't know what he thought when he was telling me that. Maybe he didn't have anything better to say, you know? Maybe he just was like, well, I don't really know how to motivate you, but
I love cookies.
Yeah, and you're a tough one. So...
I've never had a tough cupcake, so
can't be a tough cupcake, huh?
Okay, key component number 8 of raising a successful child is pay attention to your children. According to a study conducted by the University of Delaware, children were more likely to be successful if their parents paid attention and listened to them. Ask how their day was, recognize their creativity, their passions, and just listen. It's also important to pay attention to your children's emotional well-being. We already know that positivity is linked to increased success rates. So is a child's emotional well-being. How do you practice this?
Isn't it my strong suit?
How do you not practice this?
You know, I tend to, and I'm going to say this is a weakness, to be a workaholic. I think I've gotten better over time in working on that, like in saying to myself, like, no work past this time, or, you know, this time that I'm with my family, I'm going to focus. I'm not going to look at my phone. I'm not going to, you know, like, work will be there tomorrow.
Yep.
So I don't think that I've been the best always, but I think that I've gotten better. And, you know, some of the things that you can do are just simple, like simply asking your child when they come in, hey, how was your day? How was your class? What did you learn? You know, what did you like about today? You know, and just letting them know that you care about the small things, because when you care about the small things and you open up that conversation, they actually start to feel more comfortable with coming to you and speaking to you. So then when there's bigger things, they're going to come consult you. And that's a time where it can be a teachable moment, you know?
Right. I think this is an area I can also improve into. I feel like I listen now a lot more than I did when my kids were small. So I think this is something that I've learned over time. And I don't know, maybe it's just because now I have more time to spend listening. Like when I was in the military, it was always go, go, go. And now I have more time to sit down and be interested. And I was interested. It's just like you just don't have the opportunities. You don't have as many opportunities, you know? But this is definitely an area where I feel like I can improve.
You know what's funny is, and my mom had actually reminded me of this recently. I saw my mom recently, and we were talking about, she was talking about my youngest daughter, and she was talking about how there was a time where she was in the vehicle with her, and she was trying to get her attention. It started to annoy my mom, right? Like she was in the middle of doing something or whatever it was. And so when she finally was like, what? Like, what? You know, what, Alicia? And she said, you're the best grandma ever, you know? And of course it makes you smile, and then you feel really bad. Then you're like, man, I'm not the best grandma, you know? And it made me think about a time in the car when I had picked her up from daycare after work, and I had had a really stressful day, and all I wanted to do was listen to music and just relax and not think about work. And she wanted to tell me about her day. And so I turned down the music and took a deep breath, and I let her tell me about her day. And she's like, Mom, I love you so much. You're the best mom ever. And you know what? Those are those moments where, as a parent, like, you could really be failing as a parent. You could really be making some big mistakes. But man, when your kid tells you something like that and they mean it, you know,
Yeah.
it reinforces something in you. You know, sometimes your kids are teaching you, believe it or not.
Yeah. That's a true statement.
Sometimes they're tough lessons.
Yeah.
You know, speaking of being a tough cookie, when when my oldest two kids are 9 months apart. So, and I had my first child when I was 15. I had my daughter early, which ended up, it made them 9 months apart. So really close together. So when they were little, I've always thought about when I purchased something, the investment in making it last. So I was like, I'm going to get them toddler beds. I'm not going to put them in cribs. Like they're probably too big for crib now, and toddler bed will last a while. So I get them each this toddler bed. They're able to get up and down out of it, you know. And they're pretty good about listening, going to bed, whatever. They were good kids. But something would happen every single morning, without fail. And it didn't matter what time I woke up. My son would get into his diaper. And I don't know how you poop on the regular every single night or every single morning. I don't. But he would paint his sister and his bed with poop. And the beds, about these style of beds, like the plastic is kind of grainy. So it doesn't clean well. Like you have to use a scrub brush. Like you really have to scrub. You can't just wipe it down with the Clorox wipe. So one morning I had done so many different things. I had tried not to feed him past a certain time. I had tried not to give him liquid past a certain time. I tried to wake up earlier. Like there's so many things that I tried. I tried to talk to him about not getting in his diaper. Like I thought I had done everything I possibly could do. And so one morning when I went in the room, and of course, again, there's poop everywhere. And I sat on the floor and I cried. And I was like, God, I do not know that I was meant to be a mother. You know, like this is super stressful. You know, little did I know that was building me up for the stress to come, because there was much more stressful moments than that. But that was super stressful at the time, you know. And then when you call your dad for comfort and he says, girl, you're a tough cookie, you'll figure it out. And yeah, I guess I'm a tough cookie. I figured it out.
Maybe that's what he was eating at night that was causing it.
Those sugar cookies that he turned you on to. So key component number 9 of raising a successful child is aim higher and make more money. I know some people are going to hear this and they're going to cringe. Yes, stay at home, mom or dad, go to work. According to research conducted by Stafford University, the achievement gap between low-income families and high-income families is 30 to 40%. Now, you assume that one of you being home full-time is better, right? Wrong. According to Harvard Business School, research concluded that female children of mothers who worked outside the home earned 23% more than their peers whose mothers stayed at home, and male children spent more time with their children and more time on housework. If you don't believe me, look it up. Mm-hmm. Seriously, because I was a little bit shocked. And you know, I'm going to kind of go a little bit off topic for a second, but when doing the research on all of this, because I really like to have solid information, you know, I don't want to just give you our opinions and our experiences and not really give you something that you can take away and use. a lot of the research is a little bit skewed. And the reason that it's skewed is because it's mostly women who stay home. So it's not just about the woman. If the man's staying home too, I'm sure that the results are going to be the same. A lot of the research talks about when there's a single parent home, that typically the child does better in the male home of the single parent. Well, do you know why that is? Because males make significantly more money. So they have access to more opportunities. So keep that in mind, because when you go, like, I fact check stuff, so go fact check. Keep that in mind, because a lot of that stuff is a little bit, know that there's a little bit of a disparity there because of that.
Yeah, but I think the point there, and I think that it's important to understand when we say make more money, it's not talking about like single household, like when you're a single parent. Obviously, when you're a single parent, you're doing the best that you can, right, and you're making the most that you can with the time that you have.
Right,
like,
sure.
So that's not really what we're talking about. We're really talking about one parent choosing to be a stay-at-home parent.
When you can bring money in.
when you have the ability to go work, like, you know what I'm saying? So if you have the ability to go work and you're thinking, oh, if I stay home, take care of my kid will be better. Actually, that's the opposite. If you stay home with your kid will not be better. Your kid will be worse. You going to work will have a propensity to push your kid to be better, and also create some independence in it. You know what I'm saying? Like, and obviously the logistics have to match up, and you can't be going out and getting a job and you have to pay for daycare, and your daycare is all your check you're making. Like, that's just going to cause stress, right? But I think that's, take that with a grain of salt in terms of making more money. But also, part of being a parent and teaching your kid continuous learning, or having like being a lifelong learner, part of that is being a lifelong learner and always trying to continue to improve your situation, so that you will create that trait in your children. Your children will see you studying on that next degree, or trying to get that certification, or trying to get that next promotion. They'll see that, and they'll understand that, that's how they can advance. I had a friend of mine that said he saw people being successful, but no one ever sat him down and told him, this is how you go from having no money to having a Mercedes or a house. Or he never saw how it lined up, how to get from point A to point B. And so when he went out to chase money, he did it based off of what he observed in the community. No one ever sat him down and said, this is how, you're good at sports. You can get a scholarship, go to college. You can get a college degree. You can get a job. You know what I'm saying? No one sat him down and walked him through that process. And so when he was exposed to the environment, he just went out and did what he thought was the only thing that he could do to get
modeling behavior.
Yeah, exactly. Except that it was modeling after bad behavior. And then he ended up getting caught up in that.
And, I didn't really realize how important that is. And you can't always control, like we talked about earlier, you can't always control who your children are around. They're going to be around bad students and good students at school. If you have them in a sport where you drop them off at class, they're going to be exposed to kids who don't have good parents who teach them really bad things, or kids who are abused, like they'll hear things or learn things. My daughter asked me a question about suicide when she was like 5, and I was like, how do I explain suicide to a 5-year-old? That's just not something you should have to explain to a 5-year-old. I never realized how important it was to expose your children to as much as possible. So if you're able to go outside your village to visit, even if you don't make a lot of money, if you just drive your children up the street of the big houses and talk to them about how hard those people had to work in order to be able to be in those big houses, like, don't let it be a limited belief for you that because you don't have a certain amount of money that you can't provide your children with the tools that they need to be successful, because you can. And know, as a parent at every level, just like me, figuring this out at, 41, you're not always the smartest person, and you don't always know, like, your craft may not be in investments. So maybe somebody who's really good at investments. Expose your child to them. There's so many opportunities in any setting to expose your children to tents that are very valuable and different villages that are very valuable. And think about, when people talk about, don't put me in a box, or I'm not in a box. When you stay in the same city or town your whole life, there's so much that you don't know, because states are different, their rules are different, their people act different, countries are different, they have different rules, their cultures are different. the less that you're exposed to, the less real knowledge you have. You've stayed in that box. You haven't come out of that, out of your village. So you don't know what's happening outside the box. And what's funny is that a lot of people will be in the box and say what's happening outside the box, but they honestly don't know. But definitely important. And I just don't want everybody to be caught up on the fact that if you don't make a certain amount of money, that you can't make strides to help your children.
And also a big part of that you have to think about too is don't make the mistake of instilling limited beliefs on your children by saying, oh, those people are blessed. Those people are lucky. Those people had a hand up, or those people got help, or
Right.
you know what I'm saying? Because sometimes you'll be thinking, well, I can never acquire that because
I don't have
I don't
this-
have that. I don't, you know what I'm saying? I don't have this, or I don't have that. And that limited belief can stop you from thinking that you can achieve it the right way.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying? Like, oh, the only way you're going to ever get something like that is if you do this, or, you know what I'm saying? A lot of times people in bad neighborhoods say, well, the only way that you're going to get out of the bad neighborhood is if you play basketball, you can play football, or you can rap. You know what I'm saying?
Or sell drugs.
Or sell drugs. Well, selling drugs is the bad way, but I'm saying
Right.
the right way.
Oh, the right way.
Yeah, the right way. So you have those three options, but those are not the three options that exist. You know what I'm
Right.
saying?
There's
there's
many
a
more options.
gazillion options. You can invent something. You can start a business. You can, whatever. Like, you had an example of the kid who was selling the T-shirts who was 15 and retired his mom. He was 15 years old.
And think about that. And I'm not going to get into the school system and the flaws that I think the school system has, but imagine having a child who has a passion or is creative in a particular area, and you fuel that. Imagine what they could do. That should be important, because you can fuel that, man, big time. And you know what? A lot of times you don't need money to fuel it. Some things you do. Sports, activities, man, they're expensive.
Yeah, they are. But there's programs. There's, you know what I'm saying?
There
There's,
is.
there's family members. I don't understand how you can have like 50, 100 family members all living in the same community and nobody could put enough money together to put this kid in football. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, come on.
It's true.
Work
But
as
you know
work as a
what?
team.
But you know what? If you want people to invest in you, you got to have the work ethic.
Yeah, you do. Key component number 10 of raising a successful child is practice conflict resolution when you encounter conflict. According to research conducted at Notre Dame University, when children are witness to a mild to moderate conflict wherein positivity, compromise, and support are included, they experience higher levels of emotional security, self-esteem, and increased social skills. Guess what? When kids witness a fight and see their parents resolving it, they're actually happier than they were before they saw it. It reassures the kids that parents can work through things. Children pick up on when a parent is giving in to avoid conflict or refusing to communicate, and their own emotional response is not positive. Long-term effects of parental withdrawal are more disturbing than kids' adjustments to open conflict. Children in this instance can perceive that something is wrong, which leads to stress, but they don't understand what or why, which results in it being harder for them to adjust. Chronic stress of this type of nature to repeated exposure to destructive conflict and not conflict resolution can result in kids that are worried, anxious, hopeless, angry, aggressive, behaviorally challenged, sickly, tired, and struggling academically. Naturally, children are in high conflict families, regardless of the living situation or whether parents are married or divorced, do not perform as well in most areas of their lives, according to a University of Illinois study for review. Have you mastered this, Crystal?
No. I tell everybody getting to know yourself is the hardest thing. And sometimes when you're in a conflict, you don't even know why you're mad. Like, you're mad, but you don't know what the source is. Like, you don't know if you're mad because it hurt your feelings. You don't know if you're mad because this particular thing to you signals that it means disrespect. Like, there's just so many different things. And so when you're having conflict, it's very important when you're feeling those ways and when you don't understand to communicate that, keeping your children from seeing any conflict whatsoever, then they don't know that it exists. They think that a marriage is, a relationship is perfect and that you never fight, that it's all, happy times and the truth is that it's not, that it takes work. And so by them seeing those conflicts, And seeing how you work through them, it helps them and it lowers their stress because think about it, like we were talking about earlier, when you win, the stress of, well, now you have to win all the time.
Yeah.
So with children, thinking that you can't ever have conflict, that's stressful, you know, and nothing good comes out of that.
Yeah. I think it's also not teaching of how to handle emotions as well, because typically conflict has to do with some type of an emotion. You know what I'm saying? Either you're angry, you're upset, you're jealous, you're frustrated. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like there's an emotion happening and you're not allowing your child to see it because you think it's going to be harmful. But what happens when that child has that emotion? What happens when the child is angry or when the child is scared or frustrated or, you know, embarrassed or, you know what I'm saying? Like all those things happen. And I think it's important to teach through those moments.
Have you mastered it?
Have I mastered it? You know, I was thinking about conflict resolution and I feel like, I don't know. I don't know if I've mastered it. I don't think that I have.
I don't think you have, because if I haven't mastered it, you haven't mastered it either.
Here's a funny story. And it's what I was thinking about earlier. I was trying to remember what I was thinking about. When we were in California and Raquel was visiting and she was listening to me and you argue. We were having a conflict and it was a positive conflict. We were talking through it. And she stopped and she said, hey, and it was like the next day, like we had a conflict the day prior. And then the next day we were all talking and she's like, you know, I'm really impressed with how you guys communicate and how you guys resolve conflict. Have you guys always communicated this way or is this something that you guys learned? And then so we started giving an example of our argument the day prior and we got into a fight.
We did.
And I was like, oh, that went south really fast. And I ended up having to sleep on the couch. I don't know.
No.
You have to work through things. And sometimes it's hard to take your emotion out of the conversation. Sometimes the conflict doesn't need to be resolved immediately. And it's okay to be angry and not resolve it immediately and to step back and go, okay, why am I angry about this? And then to come back and say, hey, this is the reason why I was angry, and to be able to talk through that. I'm sure our youngest daughter has seen us have multiple conversations that are just natural conflict, you know, because we have varying, I don't know, beliefs about different things and we see things differently and we think about things and we resolve things differently. But I feel like that really empowers her to understand that no relationship is going to be perfect and every relationship is going to come with conflict and it's okay. There's nothing wrong with you because you're feeling conflict or you're feeling angry about something or you're feeling jealous about something or, you know, that's something to understand, to self-reflect and then to address, you know.
And I think that's really important is being able to self-reflect.
Yeah, I think so too. I think sometimes we don't take the time to really understand the emotion because we've never been taught how to handle emotion. You know, no one's ever said, hey, it's okay to be sad. Why are you sad? What's making you feel sad? Why does that make you feel sad? You know what I'm saying? And not going through that process and thinking, well, I'm sad. I'm just sad. You know? Well, why? I don't know why. You know, I don't know why I'm sad, you know, because I'm sad because you didn't want to spend time with me. Well, why does that make you sad? Like, I had to go to work, you know, like you really have to think through that. And you have to internally think through that and kind of work through that emotion to get to the root cause. Because maybe what you're really feeling is you're feeling lonely.
Right.
You know, I'm lonely.
And then you can do things that counteract that.
Yeah.
Or mitigate that.
Yeah, absolutely. Or you could just be understanding that your significant other has to go to work, and because you don't have a job, you need to figure some other way to fill that gap so that you're not feeling lonely. Maybe you get a club, you go join a club, a running club, or you go to the gym and work out. Whatever brings you joy, you do that so that you don't feel that loneliness as much. You know what I'm saying? And then at least when you're feeling sad, you know, I'm just feeling lonely. You know what I'm saying? I'm sad because I'm lonely. And I missed you and I haven't got a chance to spend time with you today, but I'm glad that you're here now. You know what I'm saying? Oh.
I had a soldier one time, and I often think of people that you're mentoring or that you're in charge of as kind of like your children. So you're kind of trying to steer them as well and guide them and have teachable moments. And she was really upset because until very recently, females were not on the front lines at all. And as a medic, you will not be officially assigned to a unit such as like a route clearing team like I was, or EOD, which is, you know, where they go and they take the bombs and they set them off, you know, in a safe way. she was upset because she went to her leaders and said, I really want to be a medic for this area. And it was an all male area. And they're like, no. And so I asked her, I said, she was all spun up and she's like, I'm going to go do an official complaint. And, I think it's just because I'm a female. And I said, you know what? I said, listen, I said, there's a lot of impact that you don't understand by putting you in that position that can come back on them, things that can happen to you that you didn't think about, and exposing you to things that you have no idea that you're going to be exposed to, or putting you in a situation where you come back and you're missing a limb, So I asked her, I said, why is it that you're so intent on doing this? And she said, because there's really not very many females that get to do this. And so I said, okay, what is it that you want to do overall in life? And so when she tells me it has absolutely nothing to do with even being medical or anything. And I'm like, so why would this be so important for you to experience, for you to come back and say, hey, I did something that, that typically female medics don't do? Somebody on the civilian side, first of all, probably isn't going to understand that. Yeah, you were the first or the second or whatever. You were one of the few that did whatever. But how is that helping your long-term goal, And after we talked it through, she's like, you know what? I really was upset because I wanted to do this. I wanted, this, it felt like it was important to me, but in all actuality, it's not. And I told her, I said, what if, nobody plans to go there and have something happen, but what if you go there and you lose both legs, and now you can't do what it is that you really, really want to do? Is that a risk that you're willing to take, And after she processed all of that, she's like, I really appreciate you helping me go through that, because it wasn't what I thought it was. And by talking that through and talking through the conflict that I was having, I realized that it wasn't something that was important to me. And the reason I was upset really didn't have anything to do with them. It really didn't, So I think it's important to do the same thing with your children.
Yeah, I agree. And that's really good mentorship, really getting down to the root cause of what is the issue. And you framed it very positively when you said, what's your ultimate goal? Like, what do you really want to do? Oh, I want to be a pilot. Well, what's that got to do with what you're asking for?
Right.
Like you want to be a pilot. Why are you pursuing this so aggressively? Like, if it doesn't really lead to you being a pilot, you're just wasting your time. Like, really. Yeah. So that's really good. I'm glad that you were able to talk that person through that process. And when you're dealing with your children, I think it's also important. Like, my son came to me and I said, hey, what do you want to do with your life? And he was like, oh, I want to be, I said, what do you enjoy doing? I like traveling. I like seeing new places. And like, okay, so why don't you find a job where that's what you do? Why don't you find a job where you travel, like being an air marshal or being a flight attendant or being a pilot, or, something where you're going to have the opportunity to do what you love doing in your job.
And what gets you there? What's in the path that gets you there?
Right. What's the path that gets you there? And so I think it's a lot of times we try to tell our kids, hey, in order to be successful, you need to do this. You're going to be a doctor. You're going to be a lawyer. You're going to be an engineer. But maybe the kid doesn't want to do that. And you never even ask the kid, hey, what is it you want to do? What do you like doing? I like painting. Well, maybe you want to own an art studio, or maybe you want to work in a museum, or maybe, like there's so many different options when it comes to art that you can do. Besides, like, there's just so many different options. And then pushing that kid from a young age to pursue what they like. I know that one time Raquel really loved baking. And I said, well, why don't you start a baking company? Like, you really would want to bake. You really love baking. You want to start why don't you? He was making cakes. And I was like, well, why don't you sell these cakes? Like, these are amazing. She was making these amazing cakes. And she started selling cakes all over the place. Like, it was this big business of cakes, and the kitchen was a hot mess, and they were making cakes every day, like nonstop. And then she realized that she didn't like making cakes for a living. She liked being creative.
Right.
She liked creatively being creative and making these cakes, but she really didn't enjoy the business aspect of it, of the deadline, of not being able to choose her own designs and not being able to be as creative as she wanted to be, and she didn't enjoy it. And so that was such a great, imagine if she would have invested thousands and thousands of dollars in starting a business that as soon as she starts it, she's like, this sucks.
This isn't what I thought it was.
Yeah. Sometimes you have to go through that process.
For sure. You know, raising children can be one of the most rewarding experiences in life, but it can also be challenging, like having poop on all your walls. It's important to remember that no one can do it alone, honestly. And that's why it truly does take a village to raise a child. So we challenge you to incorporate these 10 components to raising a successful child, or warrior, as I truly see it.
Be deliberate about the village and the tents that you expose your children to. Remember that it does take a village to raise a child, and you do have the ability to influence that village and or the tents. And even in the examples where they're exposed to things that you don't want them to be exposed to, those are teachable moments.
Absolutely. Be a good role model, you know, above average, in fact. Your children will learn more from what you do than you could ever say.
Display positivity and optimism. Practice utilizing conscious intention when communicating with your children in any situation, even when you're highly emotional or emotionally charged. You can propel your children further than you could ever imagine. And we've talked about the water molecule research conducted by Dr. Emoto, where he talked about the water crystals when he would speak positivity and they would freeze into these beautiful crystals. And we've talked about that before. Your body is 80% water. So what do you think is going to happen when you speak positivity to a person? Or negativity,
it's
even
the
worse. Yeah, even worse. Your body's going to absorb that negative energy and it's going to impact you negatively. So speak positively to your children. And that means saying things as simple as, instead of saying you failed, hey, you weren't successful. Using a positive word as instead of a negative word. Failure is a negative word. Unsuccessful is a positive word. You know what I'm saying? It's the same word. Hey, you weren't successful, but you can be. You know what I'm saying? Hey, you didn't win, as opposed to saying, hey, you lost. You know what I'm saying? Hey, you didn't win. That's a positive way.
Or even saying you didn't win this time.
Yeah, you didn't win this time. You're gonna train. You're gonna learn. You're gonna get better, and you're gonna win next time.
Right.
You know?
Don't transfer your burdens or your emotions to your children. Practice keeping your children's rucksacks light. Don't add extra weight for them to carry. Speed them up. Don't slow them down.
Maintain an authoritative parenting style. Be rational in guiding your children. Just because you're the parent doesn't always mean that you're the rational one.
That's true. A lot sometimes. Empower your children to raise their sword. You will not always be there. So that day that your child gets the battle line and they've got to cross it without you, be confident that they're prepared to raise that sword.
Let your child fail, but think effort over failure. Throw the everybody gets a trophy mentality out the window. Teach your children how to pick themselves up, brush themselves off, and do better, and be supportive.
Pay attention to your children. Listen to them when they want to share some good news or bad news, and be supportive.
Aim higher. Make more money. Position you and your family in a better situation. Remember that your children learn more from what you do than what you say.
Practice conflict resolution when you encounter conflict. Let your children see that you can have a disagreement or serious conflict, but resolve it.
Don't wait for your children to be adults to begin providing them with the tools to be successful. Do it now. If you want to level up your parenting game, we challenge all of you to master these 10 components of raising a successful child, so that you can help your children develop the skills and the mindset that they need to succeed. I know I want my children to be emotionally intelligent, strong, smart, and independent. I don't want them to be 40, at home, mustering through a bad relationship. I also don't want to see any of my children slaughtered on the battlefield of life with no tools and a heavy rucksack. A quote by Crystal Garcia reads, "Empower your child to draw and raise their sword as they cross the line of life without you into the battlefield."